When you think of takedown defense, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? It's probably like everyone else does. Some kind of down blocking or sprawling action, whereas your opponent shoots for your legs, you get your legs back and away from your opponent, and you resist his ability to control your legs and put you down. Okay, of course, it's an oversimplification, but it's probably true. That's how most people instinctively think when they think of takedown defense. Someone shoots for your legs, you get your legs back and away and protect yourself. That's probably the first and most important form of takedown defense in most people's minds. And yet, in jiu-jitsu, it's only half the story. There is a second half to the story, which is actually the more interesting half. And this is the defense to take down scoring criteria once you've been taken down. Okay, it's one thing to stop an opponent's shot. Okay, Marcelo comes in for a double, and from here, get our legs back, and we put our legs in a position where it's hard for him now to go and finish the takedown. But what about situations where Marcelo does get us down? Okay, and he comes in, hits that double leg, and from here, we get taken down to the floor like so. This is where things get interesting. From here, it's not yet clear if Marcelo is going to score, because my back is off the ground. And things start to get interesting at this point. This is where what we refer to as scrimmaging comes into play. Placido must scrimmage to get points under the criteria of jiu-jitsu, which means either putting one of my hips and one of my shoulders on the ground for 3 seconds, or taking my back as I try to resist him. And I want to scrimmage in the opposite direction. I want to scrimmage to avoid him getting scores. So if Placido, for example, starts moving around behind me and threatening my back as I come up, I have to be able to prevent him from getting hooks in. As I see Placido get in a hook, I have to be able to block that hook out. As I see him converting into seatbelt, trying to get his hands together, we've got to be able to stop him from connecting his hands. Okay? If he does get one hook in and falls over, I must be able to prevent him from scoring on the second hook. Because I've got both a hip on the shoulder, a hip and a shoulder on the ground now, I can't stay here for more than 3 seconds. So time becomes a consideration. And from here, we have to be able to go across into our various defenses. Placido goes to scramble back up and take my back the second time. As he comes around the corner, I have to be able to roll, come through, and come back into neutral position. Okay? And you can see there's a lot going on there in terms of defending the scoring criteria. In jiu-jitsu, it's not enough to just defend the takedown. That's the first chapter of the story. The second chapter is defending the scoring criteria on the ground. And then all kinds of crazy considerations that have nothing to do with wrestling come into it. The rule of time, 3 seconds. You've got 3 seconds to avoid scoring criteria. The idea of preventing your opponent getting hooks in. The idea of making sure that your shoulder and hip are never on the floor for more than 3 seconds. There's a whole bunch of things that have nothing to do with the sport of wrestling and are entirely distinct to the sport of jiu-jitsu. And you must be able to defend those aspects of scoring down on the floor. That's where what we refer to as scrimmaging comes into play. Your opponent scrimmages for points and you scrimmage back trying to prevent points. It's a fascinating part of the game and very much unique to the sport of jiu-jitsu. We'll be spending a lot of time on that throughout the course of this video. Now, we look at this idea that there are certain positions in the standing position which confer great advantage and which make takedowns and overall control so much easier, okay? Wrestling in front of people is hard work, and it's even dangerous work. There's all kinds of things that can happen, guillotines, all kinds of counters, okay? But once you start getting behind people, a lot of that goes out the window. You can control people here for long periods of time and in a way which is pretty much risk-free. There's very few effective submissions your opponent can use on you from there. And your opponent is pretty much in a defensive mindset once you get behind him like that. Just some considerations on control. First, how should I grip my opponent? Where should I grip my opponent? Okay, gripping up high doesn't do a lot of good. So let's make sure we control all the way through. In general, not always, but in general, you want to have a long arm and a short arm. And you have a bunch of different grip options here. If you want mobility around your opponent's body, 10 finger grips are very good. They enable you to slide from one side to the other very rapidly. Okay. If you want a tighter grip, palm to palm is good. This is particularly good when we go long with one arm and short with the other. Okay? If you feel your opponent's waist is relatively thin and you have long arms, even better is to lock wrist to wrist in like so. And this gives a very, very tight connection to your opponent. With regards to my body positioning, some people like to be directly behind. Very often you'll see people step around to the side. This is where I usually prefer to work, like so. Okay? When we get to a good position, we generally want our hips lower than our opponent's hips. If I stand too tall in positions like this, your opponent can turn his hips and throw you to all kinds of counters. Okay, so generally we want our hips a little bit lower than his. So don't be afraid to bend those legs and get to positions where one arm is long, one arm is short. You choke up on your opponent, you have excellent control. Now, from Placido's perspective, when I go to control him, he should feel that most of my control comes from my elbow. I know it looks like the control comes from the lock of the hands, but what really gives control is my elbow pulling my training partner's hip. You get your elbow all the way around by locking long arm, short arm. Placido will feel from here, this is where I control him, between my elbows. The lock of the hands is really just designed to keep my elbows in position. It's the elbows that control the hips. So one elbow locks in tight here and the other pulls on the other side. So when Placido goes to move around, you find yourself in excellent position to control this guy's movement. Okay? So, key themes: long arm, short arm. One arm comes long around the corner. One arm comes short. You have a choice between 10 finger, palm to palm, and wrist to wrist. And the real key is to trap him between your elbows here. The elbows control the hips. So when we lock, when he goes to move around, he feels his two hips are being controlled by my elbows. We can play with our two legs behind him, or we can move to the side and use our knee to off balance our training partner and bring his hands down towards the floor. You can have your foot off the ground if you wish and use your knee like so, or you can ground your foot like so. Okay? Please bear in mind that when you work in this position, your opponent will be looking to use a whizzer or overhook to stop and control you. So for example, if I'm on this side, Placido can reach back and use the reach back whizzer. Now I'm no longer on his back. His whizzer is between his back and myself. And from here he can counter us with all kinds of throws. In addition, he can reach back for a switch and turn in and hook inside my legs and potentially cause problems. So we want to make sure that we can stop a reach back whizzer. If I ever feel my opponent reaching back for a whizzer, I always walk to the other side. Every time I feel a whizzer reaching, we walk to the other side of his body. The whizzer goes to reach, and we walk across to the other side of the body. If I feel he's reaching with a whizzer, I can counter by forcing his hands to the mat, by using my knee as a blocker. I don't crash on my training partner's knee and try to hurt him. I just put my knee there as a blocker. As he reaches back with the whizzer, I just force his hands to the mat. If his hands are on the mat, there's obviously no whizzer. Okay? So some simple practical ways to stop someone getting a whizzer. If I'm naive, I just put my head down here. He easily gets to a whizzer, gets his legs back, and now he's in a position to fight me. So, to stop the whizzer, a bunch of ways to do it. The first is to make sure his hands go to the mat whenever possible by blocking his knee. That's one simple one. Second method, moving to the other side. He goes to reach back, and I just move to the opposite side. Every time I see him reaching back, we move to the opposite side until we can put his hands on the floor. Third method, put your ear on his back. Here, you can see I'm on Placido's left-hand side, and I foolishly put my right ear on his back. As a result, he easily locks a whizzer, gets his legs back, and now he can fight me. If I'm on his left-hand side, I want my left ear on his back. So when he goes to reach back for the whizzer, the most he'll ever get is my lat muscle. And that's not the end of the world. If someone gets the lat muscle, I can always walk to the other side to take it off. Okay, so once again, I'm currently on Placido's left-hand side. If I'm naive and I put my right ear on his back, I give him the whizzer. So if I'm on his left-hand side, it's up to me to make sure my left ear goes on his back. When he reaches back now, the most he can get is a lat grip. reverse over back grip. And from here, I counter that by simply walking to the other side and putting his hands down on the floor. Okay? So this is the first set of considerations with regards your standing rear body lock, how to control the position overall. Let's quickly summarize the main ideas. First, I can't just have my legs too straight. I apply no body weight to them. Okay? We want to make sure we're always squatting with our hips slightly lower than his hips at all times. Secondly, I want to control my training partner between my elbows. That means I can either lock 10 finger if I want my arms to move around his body easily, palm to palm for a kind of compromise grip, which is loose enough to be movable but fairly tight as well, or wrist to wrist for extreme tightness that locks our opponent's hips between our elbows. When we combine this with a good solid low base, when he goes to move you around, it'll be very difficult and you can hang off him for long periods of time. I should have an ability to put his hands on the mat at any given moment. This is done by blocking with a knee and pushing to force those hands down to the floor. If he comes back up, there's a danger now of him putting a whizzer on. And that could definitely screw up the whole program. So we can stop this by putting our ear on the back. If I'm on the left-hand side, it should be my left ear. If he tries to get a whizzer now, it's going to be very, very difficult. Second method, from here, if my opponent reaches back for the whizzer, I simply move away from the whizzer. Every time I feel the reach back, I move to the other side. Okay? These simple methods can give you great stability and control from the standing rear body lock.